Welcome to Clicks and Coffee. I'm Alexander, and here we dive deep into the journeys of entrepreneurs and marketing innovators. Each episode, we uncover the challenges, triumphs, and unique strategies of our amazing guests, giving you valuable insights and inspiration. Our goal is to build a community of growth-oriented professionals ready to learn, collaborate, and thrive in the ever-evolving world of digital marketing. So whether you're here for the latest trends or looking for that next big idea, you've come to the right place. Let's get started. And today we've got Sander Shamiss, the CEO of goTRG, joining us. And one number that I wanted to mention is $700+ billion. This is the number, the amount of dollars for returns in online purchases. And this is Sander's mission to solve that excess, that problem. What do we do with all of that? So this episode is going to be pretty amazing. And I can't wait for you to hear his story. Let's dive in. Sander, thanks for being here.
Thank you very much for having me, Alexander. I guess we could start with a $714 billion number. It's not 714, it fluctuates year over year. I have a nice chart I made for you here. It kind of shows you some of these numbers, and I guess you can kind of show it later. But this year it's actually gone down a little bit. As you can see, it's closer around 750, but it almost hit 800, 812, 813 in 2022. The reason why it went down is there's some fraud prevention that was done. That number holistically includes in-store returns. It includes e-commerce returns, but it also includes the kind of things inside there like fraud, buyer remorse, actual real return issues like defective units and whatnot. And I think the more interesting part about returns is the amount that they recover. Most people would think that the returns that they purchase as they purchase them go right back on the shelf. And that's the furthest thing away from the truth. You can't do that with anything that has data. You have to wipe the data. You can't do that with anything where you're not certain what's inside the item, like a computer or a phone or even a piece of RAM. It's very difficult to do that with clothing. You have to make sure that clothing wasn't worn. Undergarments, of course, can never go back on the shelf. There's a
Beauty
real
products
challenge.
also.
Pardon me?
Beauty products.
Definitely, beauty products are in there. Any consumables are extremely difficult to put back. So what you find is less than 10% of the product actually gets restocked. Usually the recovery for a retailer is approximately 15 cents on the dollar. So you end up recovering a very small amount. I mean, out of this number, they recover approximately around $112 billion. And the cost of handling it is approximately 150 billion. So you ask yourself, what's the point? Why bother? Why bother handling the product in the first place? Well, the alternative is basically taking this $700+ billion of items and throwing them out, ending up in landfills. And that's a terrible thing. Our mission is solving returns. What does solving returns mean? It means finding a way to get that product back onto the second shelf or that secondary market, the re-commerce piece. To do that, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. A bunch of software has to be written. A lot of supply chain has to be set up. And then ultimately, you need the re-commerce infrastructure, the marketplaces, and the understanding of those marketplaces to get that product back onto that second shelf. It really is an inclusive, cohesive solution. For me, it's kind of a life mission. I definitely didn't go into this.
So talking about that, like, because we can hear that it's something very dear to your heart. How did you even get started in like nobody really bothers about returns. They just look at the return policy, free returns, and I'm not going to name the company that does that.
There's quite a few. There's quite
a few, but the main one is free returns. And so how did you end up doing that? Like, because this is, such something that is so important, but people care little about this.
Ironically, most companies are actually clawing back on free returns right now, but that's besides the point. We can get to that later.
That's a good
My story is unique. I definitely did not intend to go into reverse logistics. Nobody comes out of school or wakes up in the morning and says, you know what, I'm going to solve returns. It's reverse logistics is definitely not a sexy industry, or at least it's not perceived that way. I think today it's very hot and people are very excited about it. And I think it's because companies like ours put it front and center. And I think organizations like the Reverse Logistics Organization, for example, really evangelize the returns and what returns management means. But I think when I got into it, it was not something that I intended to stay in for a very long time. For me, I was a software guy. I built, e-commerce sites for SMBs, or small businesses and medium-sized businesses. I left Unilever as a contractor around 2000. I started my own business, me and a friend, and we were just selling small websites. I was the sales guy. I would go door to door. He would make the appointments, and I'd sell these sites. I came across Air Transat. And I made a deal with Air Transat to build them a site where they can, it was in Canada, of course, because that's where I grew up, where they could sell um, vacation packages that were broken up into hotels and airfare on a site where a customer could come and choose their own airfare and then pick a hotel with it. Sound familiar, right? 2001, it didn't sound very familiar.
I totally
So we
agree.
gave them a whole plan. Everything was done. They gave us a budget. I was supposed to have a piece of the business. I got super excited about it. And the contract signing, the final negotiation was around August, and the contract signing was supposed to happen September 11th at 11 a.m. And of course, that never happened.
Oh my
Once those
God.
airplanes hit, they kind of postponed everything. They postponed the project, and I would call them. I remember every week, what's going on? They said, we're waiting. We don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
We lost a lot of money doing September 11th. There's a lot of new regulation. It's a little bit difficult. I, of course, didn't want to wait. I found a friend which knew another friend in Canada, and he brought me to this liquidation warehouse. And it's the first time I ever saw returns. And as soon as I saw them, I just fell in love. I said, what is this? How does it happen? Where does it come from? It came from actually a company called Future Shop. And Future Shop later was purchased by Best Buy Canada. And they actually became Best Buy Canada. Best Buy US entered Canada through Future Shop. And I started buying some very basic liquidation product from them and bringing it back to life, which is a world I didn't understand because it wasn't a software world. And for me to succeed, I realized I needed to write SaaS that could put this product onto the marketplace. And that's where the journey started. I started writing software companies that could do e-commerce, companies like Channel Advisor, a company called Kiozo, which I founded and sold later, and started getting into the supply chain world, which I tried to avoid for a very long period of time, but over time it was inevitable. By 2008, I met a gentleman named Herb Shear in a company called Janko, which was the largest. Janko sold later for over $1 billion to FedEx, I think around 2016. But that company and its CEO, Bob, and actually my partner that came from that company, one of my partners, a gentleman named Peter Carfrey, he he introduced me. He was working there as their head of branding and marketing, and he introduced me to the world, and I started solving returns for them. At that time, it was very interesting because all they did, and they were the largest reverse logistics company, maybe the only at that time, they just received a product from the major retailers. They would sort it out, and the way they sorted it is just by what went back to the vendor and what the retailer wanted liquidated. They had these marketplaces where they liquidated the product basically as on anywhere from 10 to 20 cents on a dollar, and the rest went to the vendors. I asked, why is it going to the vendors, and why are we just liquidating? Why don't we try to bring some of this product back to life and recover more for these retailers, the vendors themselves, and ultimately for you guys? You're going to make more selling an item for 80 cents on a dollar with whatever commission you're taking than, of course, for 10, 15 cents on a dollar. And that's really where the concept was born. And I think over time we developed the mission of solving returns, and that mission's really been through a lot of iterations over the years. We're almost 18 years old as a company. Um, that mission's the most important thing. I think a business without a mission is a kind of fledgling. To create an enterprise, you really need a strong mission. That's my own personal kind of ideology. And that mission and that vision has driven us for the last 18 years to kind of get to where we are today.
And that's a great mission that is so relevant, and that will keep being relevant more and more as year passes, as e-commerce is really gaining more and more market shares.
Momentum, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And then since COVID, I'm sure that has been a
Well,
couple of years that were a little crazy for you guys, for everybody in the e-commerce.
it's funny because people think that the return rate was always this high. As e-commerce grows, the return rate becomes higher and higher. So the average return rate when I got into the business, let's call it 2008, 2009, was probably 6 to 8% for a standard retailer. So you looked at a big box retailer, was just 6 to 8%, wasn't huge. As the advent of e-commerce got got more and more popular and people became more comfortable using the current tools as Amazon, kind of proliferated its dominance over the world of e-commerce and fulfilled items within 1 to 2 days, people started buying more and returning more. And they used their homes to do what's called bracketing, which was basically a wardrobing or
Yep. I
change
exactly
room.
what you're talking
And
about.
people, I can't, I look at an item online, I like it, but I don't know, is it medium, is it large? There's technology that we put into place to make sure that we can, reduce the amount of returns. But no matter what, people are still going to wardrobe. It's very difficult to get that number down. So that e-commerce rate jumped. It jumped in some cases in certain companies to like 40%. Mattress companies, clothing companies.
Mattress.
I don't want to name the companies because it's pretty embarrassing, but some of these companies had 40% return rates. Their entire margins were tied up in their returns. So it really needed a solution. And we were there. Obviously, we were kind of the founders of bringing items back to life. So we were there to manage end-to-end solutions, and it was absolutely an amazing journey to get from where we are today from where we were before to where we are today. The number is down now, but collectively, as e-commerce sales grow, even if you reduce that from 40% to 15, 20%, that native number, the collective number from the 700 and change $billion grows to about 15. So the average return rate blended between brick and mortar and e-commerce about 15% right now, which is a huge number.
It's more than double of what it used to be.
Yeah, it's about 5.1 trillion is the total retail kind of consumable market cap, and then about 720 billion is the return loan. So, and there's different numbers from different places, but overall, that's about the right number.
It's pretty crazy. But so the very interesting thing about your company is that there are a lot of companies that do 3PL that help with sending the product. You have a lot of companies that have like all this technology, but no companies is a true, like, you can process returns also with those companies, but there is nothing really made for larger scale and something that is like completely
End-to-end.
and so what exactly, how is
The evolution?
the group, the evolution, and I'm interested in that, but also how is the group broken down, because I know you have different parts of the group, different brands and different solution for different retailers' goals.
So I think the easiest way to look at it is by the problem. So you have a problem. We have this nice slide here which we put together, but it's very simple. Problem at the end is the customer experience. It starts with the customer experience, right? There's always a perspective of the customer experience itself, and you can chop up the customer experience into many things. You could say the pre-purchase experience. It's definitely a part of the return. How you perceive the product when you're on that e-commerce site determines your ability to keep the item, your will as a consumer to keep the item. So how I present that product page and ultimately that checkout page to you will determine how you whether you're keeping the item or not. How true are my sizes for clothing? How accurate is my description for electronics? How well put together is the page? How true are the reviews about the item? All those things. What things do I offer? How transparent am I about my return policy? If I'm going to charge you a restocking fee, am I saying it on the way out? If there's an option not to charge a restocking fee, am I charging you for it on the way out? A lot of these things are just not e-commerce tools that are currently available today. And they're not transparent in most e-commerce platforms. So if you look at something simple like a Shopify or a Wix, or something more complex like an Adobe Magento or a Salesforce solution, do they have that incorporated? Do they have strategic alliances and partners? And we have some of these companies are strategic alliances and partners, and we do make sure that we put our expertise into that front-end experience to make sure that we reduce the return as much as possible. Our goal is to solve returns. It's not to handle returns. Handling returns is an inevitable reality. So no matter what, you're not going to avoid it. But the point is to reduce it as much as possible. How do you reduce it? Well, give a better front-end customer experience. Provide more information. Do all the things that I talked about a second ago. For those returns that are unavoidable or where there's buyer remorse or customer, can you incent them to keep it? Can you give them a certain discount if they choose to return and they're a trusted customer? Can you provide the trusted customer algorithm? For items that are not worth returning, can you give them a keep it algorithm? For items that require exchange or that you could potentially exchange and save the sale, are you offering all that? Are there insurances available all the way, extended warranties and things of that nature? Are you working with a vendor, with a retailer, and all these other third parties to help you do that? So I would say there's a pre-purchase experience, there's a post-purchase experience on the technology side, and that's the front-end customer experience piece. And there's an entire ecosystem of technology that powers the return, the back end piece that captures all that data, how it's transferred into actual insightable data that you can use to reduce future returns. How do you market to the customers moving forward? The supply chain logistics, the shipping discounts, and the many different shipping options that are available, the consolidation of the returns, companies like Happy Returns that consolidate product throughout the different ecosystems, or like the UPSs or FedExes of the world that have it available. Some retailers that started offering these services. And of course, the physical handling of the return, the supply chain itself, when it gets somewhere, how do you not transport it a bunch of times? How do you deal with it at the first touch? Meaning, how do you bring it back to life? How do you calculate all that ERP cost, all that physical touch cost? And then ultimately, once you do all that, how do you determine what marketplace is going to sell? And that's the most important thing, because that determination, if you could feed it back to your own marketplace, discounted slightly or not at all, if it's a brand new item, then you're recovering anywhere from 80 cents to 100 cents on a dollar. That's obviously a much different calculation in terms of what you're going to touch and how you're going to handle product than something that you can only sell for 15 cents on a dollar. So that data of where it's going to go, its ultimate destination or its second shelf, is just as important as knowing what your cost of touching an item is, whereas avoiding the return in the first place, because you can determine what that discount to the customer is. The customer may not be happy with the quality of your good at the price that you sold them at, but maybe if you give them a reduction that's big enough on the front end, especially if they're a trusted customer, that return it will never happen. And if that reduction is accumulated, is inclusive of basically the price that you would have paid anyways by handling all this product, then you're saving the customer, creating a happy customer, and avoiding this entire supply chain. And instead of paying all these third-party services, all the supply chain dollars, all these UPSs and FedExes, you're actually using a piece of tech to avoid it. And again, in some cases, not possible. And you asked me about the verticals in particular. So we have the SaaS that handles both this customer experience and all this backend, the RWMS, the reverse warehouse management systems, that are not like regular traditional warehouse management systems. Forward logistics warehouse management systems are made to handle forward logistics part. It means fulfill it,
pack,
and ship and get it out the door. They call it get it, do something with it, get it out the door. The do something is usually just a fulfillment. For us, we do much more. There's an inspection, sanitization, refurbishment, repair. There's so much more to the supply chain, and you need to have the software that's capable of supporting it. You can have two identical iPhones, for example, but if one has a scratch, the other one doesn't. These are completely different serialized items. A lot of the WMSs on the planet are just not set up to do that. Yeah. And a lot of the retailers or vendors are not set up to handle the, even if the WMS has that capability, they're just not set up to handle it that way. So you need those systems. You need contract management systems that connect between the major retailers. We have retailers that have 60,000 contracts individually, some of the world's largest retailers, and they feed all their contracts from systems like Ariba into our contract management system. And then that specific contract management system basically creates a shared workspace between the vendor and the retailer, where they can look at their credit allowances, return shipments, all these statements that occur, and actually manage the relationship on that PO kind of credit debit scenario, and also feed that into 3PL. So the 3PL knows how to handle the product itself. That's a separate system onto it. So you need all these supporting back-end systems, not only front-end software systems. And of course, you need the re-commerce systems, the world I came from, that kind of channel advisor Kioza world that allows you to list an item on many marketplaces, because a lot of these marketplaces simply do not have the ability to ingest a refurbished item. So you're not going to be able to take a brand new item, an item that's a return, bring it back to life and say that's brand new, and list it on that same site, because it's not a brand new item. And that site may not be able to support a secondary UPC. So by listing it, it may end up as brand new. You have to have the capability to do that. You have to have, we're connected to a bunch of UPC management systems where we create our own UPC base for these marketplaces. We feed them new product descriptions.
Unique product code, just
yes. Sorry, I use a lot of acronyms. I'm just used to my world. I don't do a lot of podcasts.
No, but because it's very interesting, and I totally, see it that when people buy an iPhone, it's like an iPhone, amongst many.
Yeah,
but when you buy a used iPhone, it's this
it's a
particular
unique iteration of this one iPhone. It could be missing a cable. It's unique. It could have a scratch. It's
exactly.
unique.
And so that's where you come in, where you can really, differentiate and keep that uniqueness between those phones to make sure people know what they're buying.
Yeah,
And that's like a huge amount of work if you think about it, because
it's massive.
It's not just one picture for all of them. It's one picture for
it's pictures, it's descriptions, it's unique attributes. So we call the UPC catalog. We have a UPC catalog with over 100 million UPCs in it. And we feed from all our retail partners, and it's an insane amount of data. We call it attributes unique to the UPC, and then we have attributes unique to the individual iteration of the product itself. So it's two completely separate attribute bases. Collectively, those attributes represent a single unique item. And when you list that, you have to first, the marketplace needs to be able to handle it. If not, then you need to give other channels. So you need to be able to tell Mr. Brand Owner X that they can list their product on a different marketplace. And we operate our own marketplaces for that reason. And of course, we connect to the Amazons and the eBays and all these other third-party marketplaces, the Mercalibras and all that, to be able to give them an outlet. We want to see their product back on their own marketplaces. That's kind of the ultimate goal, but they don't always have that. So when we start a relationship, we'll give them an end-to-end marketplace solution. That's what we do. But it's very important to have that SaaS connected to the supply chain connected to the marketplace. So these are the verticals of our business: software, supply chain, and e-commerce. And of course, supply chain is very human capital intensive, but we operate it. We love our supply chain business. We have supply chain in Mexico, in Canada, in the United States, and in China. And we actually operate different, we have some partners in Mexico and in China, but of course we feel like we have no choice, because a lot of the vendors will say, can you repair our $50 item? And that $50 item may sell for 40 cents on a dollar, 50 or 60 cents on a dollar refurbished. So you're going to end up selling an item for $30 at max. And that $30 item may need $20 worth of work. And if it needs $20 worth of work in the continental United States, then it's just not viable, because that vendor's, but we don't want to see that item in a landfill. So we're trying to find markets or economies of scale where it makes sense to touch that item. That's the move to Mexico. That's the move to China. That's the move to Canada, to say, can we touch that item at a low enough price to leave enough margin in that item? Of course, we prefer to leave the jobs in the United States, but I mean, the economy is the economy. And that's why we create the supply chain infrastructure that we have. And I think it's the largest supply chain infrastructure for reverse logistics in the world, period. And I think that there's a few companies that compete with us on it, but I mean, connected to the software and the e-commerce, I don't think anybody offers the entire returns management end-to-end ecosystem the way we do. There's a lot of companies that do software only. There's a lot of companies that do software and partner with reverse logistics 3PLs. There's companies that do re-commerce only and partner with 3PLs as well. There's companies that do SaaS and re-commerce only, but there's very few or none that I've really come across that do the entire ecosystem and manage all the SaaS, the supply chain, and the client base inside. And our clients love us for it, especially the enterprise ones. They love us for it. We launched a new SMB product now called Return Pro, and we're doing some pilot clients. They love us too. They see in the window how much it costs them from a supply chain perspective, how much it's going to cost them to touch that item. And then we give them recommendations and say, these are the items you should touch. These are the items that should go to liquidation. Let us bring them back to life. And we fulfill them literally right out of our third-party logistics centers, our own logistics centers, our own supply chain center, which makes a lot of sense for them. They don't have to ship them around. We're working on right now to become Amazon Prime. So fulfillment centers, we're already Walmart fulfillment centers. Walmart's one of our biggest customers, and we work very closely with them. They're our first customer.
You started with Walmart.
Yeah, it's a unique story. It's a unique story. It's a crazy thing to start with the world's largest retailer. And we are so grateful to them, because The amount of things that Walmart has taught us over the years is insane, and they continue to do it. They're an amazing partner, and we love working with Walmart. We find the bigger the corporation, the more they teach you, because they have their own blind spots, and they're very happy to learn how to cover those blind spots, and they're happy to use third parties to kind of close that ecosystem. And on top of that, they taught us that if you don't solve the problem from A to Z, the solution's never going to fit what their narrative is from an enterprise perspective. Maybe an SMB it will, but from an enterprise perspective, it won't.
And so you were saying that you're launching a new product for SMBs. So this is going to be to really serve those DTC brands, e-commerce native brands that, you know, they are very good with the selling, they're very good with the marketing, but they don't really know what to do with the returns. And then, as you said, like that, I'm thinking a lot with the beauty products or the clothing brands where they try to push you to buy and then do promos, and like you put it in the cart and it's like, oh, if you buy this extra, we'll give you 20% off, and so people end up with
that's
like
the challenge on its own.
A bunch of things. So that's going to be the idea, to help all of these companies, I would say, to also offer their product or show their product in a better way to optimize that return rate and improve at the end their bottom line, because that's the whole goal.
I think the easiest way to explain it is, I think externally from an entrepreneur point of view, you're going to look at it and you're going to say there's a retailer and there's a brand or a vendor. That's never the case. In today's economy, you find a brand is also a retailer. And this is what we found. We found when we started dealing with our enterprise retailers, they would have 10,000 vendors or 15,000 vendors or 60,000 vendors in the case of some of the really big ones. And these vendors also sold direct to consumer in most cases. If they weren't private labels, they sold direct. Even if they were private labels, they had other brands that they sold similar to their current brand that they sold direct to consumer. Anything from as silly as wedding dresses, which is something crazy. You're going to say somebody returning a 5,000. Yeah, it's a big deal. And it's very difficult to handle because it's a very expensive item.
Very fragile.
Extremely fragile. To furniture, to workout equipment, to clothing, to consumer electronics. There's an entire ecosystem. Everything that's purchased gets returned. Mattresses. How do you deal with all that? If you take it as a return pro, like there's a lot of companies in the field. There's a company called Narvar. There's a company called what's the other one? Loop. And they deal with these smaller SMBs on the returns management, from a returns management point of view. What they do is they don't really differentiate between the vendor and the brand. And in a lot of cases, or the retailer, in a lot of cases, in most cases, the brand that sells as a direct to retail vendor, meaning that it's selling to a company like a Walmart directly, also has a direct to consumer website. They also have a 3P Amazon and Walmart store. So they have these three places where they take returns back. As a vendor, they're taking returns from retailer. As a D2C, they have their own .com. They're taking returns from their own .com. Maybe it's a smaller .com. Maybe it doesn't do as much as their vendor business, but they need to manage it as well. Maybe it does more in a lot of cases, depending on where the brand comes from. And then they have this 3P returns niche or need, because they have their own branded store on the Amazon and on the Walmarts or even on the eBays. And they need someone to give them a curated solution that handles their returns holistically and then can provide data around how to manage it better and recommendations of what to do with it and consolidate it in a single ecosystem. Today, they'd have to go to Loop and Narvar and say, here, I'm going to do my direct to consumer with you. Then there's nobody that offers 3P through Return Pro. We start offering 3P now. And we're making deals with companies like eBay, like Walmart, like Amazon, how to handle the 3P returns, the fulfillment returns which come with that. And then the vendor part, which comes from the enterprise piece, we already do because we handle most of the major retailers, and that flows directly into our ecosystem. So when they're logging into their SaaS, they're seeing all the returns in a single window. They're seeing why the items are returns. They're seeing consolidated reasons. They're seeing return percentages from different marketplaces. And they're saying these are from different venues. And they're saying this is the best approach to me handling a return. That's why we created it. That's what we
get
consider
better data too, because it's
sure.
consolidated.
Yeah, and we understand how to handle from a supply chain perspective the product better depending on where it comes, which is typically the same. How do you re-commerce it? They could have product they're getting as vendors, but not have the ability to send that refurbished product to that marketplace as a vendor. A seller, for example, can sell to Samsung, can sell to Walmart, and Samsung can get returns from Walmart as a vendor from the Walmart distribution centers or return centers. Walmart doesn't have the ability in their stores to take those refurbished products per se today as a refurbished product, but Walmart.com does. So we can take their Walmart.com Walmart Marketplace store and automatically list that Samsung. They still have control over their returns. They have control over their brand. They're not seeing it on some other marketplace sold at a discount and wondering how did this product get out to the market. And this is really the control of the returns ecosystem is the single most important thing to the brand. And I would not look at the brand and say a brand is just a vendor. A brand is a retailer, direct to consumer. It's a vendor directly into retail stores, and it's a 3P marketplace. So all three of those things is a unified approach of returns management. And they need the ability to have the tools to manage all of it at the same time.
No, it's pretty crazy. And so this new solution is going to be really for smaller companies to, because not right now, I imagine you work more with enterprise companies. So the idea is to have something a little bit more plug and play and to really offer insights from your enterprise, data, and at the same time help people decide or help people choose. You were saying a little bit early that the products that they should get returned and then repurpose and then resell like nothing happened, and then products that are liquidating. And so that they could also use your platform, because that's also another piece of your business is all those returns that retailers or clients don't want. You take care as well on that, and you help them sell that through liquidation.
So we try not to liquidate a lot of product. We try to bring as much back to life, but it's dependent on them. What we created with Return Pro is a very simple 20 to 40-minute onboarding wizard. And the idea is for them to be able to click around with no real help from us. There's some wizards, some videos they can watch, some help, and they're welcome to call our support department. But I mean, the idea was for them to be able to click through, add 3P marketplaces, add their D2C sites, whether they're Shopify or an Amazon site or a marketplace site or Salesforce or whatever. They can literally add those sites using this wizard 20 to 40 minutes, and they're off to the races. And that gives them the ability to use our supply chain ecosystem. So they'll literally select whether they want the product returned geolocated, whether they want to use our shipping or their own, whether they want us to refurb the product or do some value-added services, how much those value-added services are. We'll recommend which ones to do, and then they could push from the same platform that product directly into their e-commerce, and it's connected into that e-commerce marketplace. And we basically consolidate all the returns on their single window, while we still handle their enterprise returns on the vendor side and see it all through one dashboard. That's the cool part. And I think it's a lot of work on SaaS. We've invested well over 100 million over the years on software. We invest quite a substantial amount. We have, over 200 engineers that work very diligently at goTRG, and we're very proud of them. Ultimately, we're going to rebrand the entire company under the Return Pro moniker. The goTRG is basically acronym for the Recon Group. So it was TRG, and the Recon Group was the reconditioning group. And over the years, people would call us Recon, they would call us TRG. And over the years, it's just too much of a mouthful, the reconditioning group. It was a lot of it was focused around supply chain with SaaS that enabled it. Now it's a lot of SaaS, a lot of supply chain, a lot of e-commerce. So we really had to rebrand and kind of show the world what the difference is between version 1.1, version 2.1, and version 3.1 of our product. And I think that's the iteration, version 3.1 of goTRG, which is now Return Pro.
So yes, I was about to ask you, do you have any exciting projects coming, or important projects? I guess the rebranding is going to be huge.
Very cool, very cool.
Because that way, Return Pro is going to be very easy to understand what you guys are about. Because with TRG it might be a little bit more it must be a little bit more complicated for people that don't go on your website, like what is it about, what is this.
And we have actually a lot of cool AI stuff coming around. So I invest a lot, the company invests a lot, invested in robotics over the years. We have a lot of robotics partners. There's a lot of stuff coming, the world is changing. AI is amazing. We've been using machine learning in our business forever. I've heard a lot of people calling dispositioning AI. Dispositioning tools, for the most part, are mostly algorithmic, but there's been a lot of cases for machine learning in the returns field lately. For example, we've been using machine learning for UPC management. As you can imagine, 100 million UPCs. We are not Walmart. We are not Amazon. We are not these massive companies. So we'll get a new customer like Bass Pro, for example. Bass Pro Shops has, I don't know, maybe 200,000 different SKUs. We don't have a team of 50 that sit there and curate every single one of the UPCs. And the data you get from these third parties, it's not smooth, it's not clean. So what we end up doing is we end up running it through this amazing piece of machine learning we developed a few years back. And what it does is it has all these third-party scraping tools, all the ingestion that all our clients give us, and then all these APIs that we connect to ourselves, like Keepos and Camels and all that stuff. And it takes all that data and it curates, it learns how to pick the best pictures, the best descriptions, which are all unique, the best short descriptions, long descriptions, harmonized codes, countries of origin, shipping dimensions, actual product dimensions, attributes, which it breaks out and creates unique attributes for that item, and then secondary attributes that are unique to the UPC template. So it does all that, feeds it into our 3PL. It does all this cool stuff. We're probably on version 3 of that. And it's a bunch of basically agents that we've coded. That there's a pricing agent, there's a title agent, there's a category agent, and we code all these really cool AI agents, and they culminate into this machine learning piece. And what it does, it allows us to check an item super fast and make a decision super fast. We have our own ERP data. How much did it cost to do certain things in our facilities? So we pick that data up and we work even harder on that. We have these really cool X-ray tunnels right now that we're working on, which are super cool, that can tell, is an item used, especially under clothing. Clothing has a real issue. They call it the sniff test for returns. Most clothing, it's funny, you're laughing, but you wouldn't believe what they do in these 3PLs for clothing. People literally stand there with clothes and they smell it. And if the clothes looks new and it smells fairly new, it's going to go into a pile of new. I don't, I'm sorry, as a professional supply chain operation, some of the biggest 3PLs on the planet are doing this today. I don't want to name them because it's pretty embarrassing. We use purple lights, and we found that there's a better way. You can run it through an X-ray tunnel, and much like the stuff you see on like National Geographic's To Catch a Smuggler, you'll be able to see organic material on the clothing, sweat stains and things like that. You'll be able to see shoes that have been worn very, very quickly because the color is going to be different. And we're training machine learning models right now to be able to tell if that item is new or not, kind of hot dog, no hot dog. And that's the cool stuff. It's so cool from a supply chain perspective. I can geek out all day about it because that's the stuff I enjoy. And then from a e-commerce point of view, it's pricing. What's the right price? What's the velocity? What's sentiment analysis? How do you determine if it's really going to sell? I use this example all the time. I've used it in many, many interviews over the years. Elf on the Shelf is my favorite example. Elf on the Shelf is one of those items that in November, December, it's worth a lot of money. It's like a $30 item, and you can sell for $30. And when there's manufacturing crisis, you're going to sell for $100. So you're going to get more money for that Elf on the Shelf than the retail value of that item. But come Christmas, it's over. January 26th, December 26th, you couldn't give it away. It's not worth a penny. And it literally, you have to make a decision. Am I going to sit on it or am I going to liquidate it? A machine can't know that. The only way is teaching a machine that specific UPC is a Christmas related item, and that it has, and how many UPCs are very seasonal, Christmas trees, Halloween toys, Easter toys, Thanksgiving. These items are not worth much once the holiday passes. To know what to do with it, to know the value of the item, to know if we should stock it, keep it, hold it in a warehouse, or liquidate it at the lowest price, to know that we need to touch it as quickly as possible when it's still in season, it's an extremely huge undertaking from a data perspective. And that is where machine learning is going on the supply chain side and on the e-commerce side, because you have to know how to price it on the e-commerce side too. And if you don't have that kind of endpoint, that second shelf price, you're never going to be able to determine, even if the item is a prevalent item and your algorithm seems to think it's a $200 item. If it's a $200 item that has no velocity under it, you can't sell that item. So you need to be able to do sentiment analysis. You need to be able to do seasonal analysis. You need to be able to do velocity analysis. You have to be able to do all these things, everything from marketplace, listing fees to all this other stuff. And I think that that's where machine learning, and that's where kind of the cool tech, and of course robotics. We've seen tech where these robotic arms are with grapples and suction cups are going into these gaylords. They're picking out pieces of clothing, and these cameras are looking at it using that same X-ray vision and say, "This is a used item." There's no human intervention at all. There's some really
I
cool
knew
stuff.
about the Amazon robots and then like the automatic packing machines, but I didn't know about
Yeah,
this
well,
type of.
can you? I'll give you an example. There's a retailer that gets about 1 million TVs back a year. I'm not going to mention which one, but it's a retailer that gets approximately 1 million televisions. Those televisions could have policies with the vendors that say you cannot return a broken LCD or a broken bezel where there's physical damage. You can only give me back actual returns. Now, the damage can occur between a store or e-commerce customer and the return center or wherever the 3PL that's handling this product. You would have to have a tremendous amount of employees physically touching this product if you're if you're if you're trying to determine if there's a broken LCD or broken bezel. Take it out, if you plug it in, it's not always visible. You don't always see the bleeding of the LCD, always see the cracks on the screen. There's a lot of work to be done. If you run it through a very simple tunnel and you teach a piece of machine learning how to identify broken screen, that X-ray or CT can literally show you a broken screen without ever opening the box. You can do it at the store level, you can do it at the distribution center, you can do it at a return center. I know I'm getting excited about it because it's such exciting
No,
technology.
but it's
It
amazing
saves so
because
much money.
and that is going to save time and it's going to save money because there is less manipulation of the item, so less risks
100%.
of breaking it, because that can happen too. Somebody is
Yeah.
trying to get it out.
It happens all the time. You're preaching to the choir. It happens in our buildings. It happens in our retail partners' buildings. It happens in 3PL buildings. It's unavoidable. It's human error, right? And you're trying to, and it's also extremely cumbersome. Imagine you have the job in a warehouse of lifting 50 to 80-inch televisions. It's very difficult.
Yes.
You have to find the right teammates. You have to give them the right support. You have to give them a pulley system. It's not an easy job. So these technology solutions don't only help the retailer's bottom line, it also helps the employees on the floor. There's a warehouse shortage on labor. There's a reason for it. Who wants to sit in a warehouse and unpack 50 to 80-inch TVs all day? And my back is bad enough lifting weights. I can imagine that job. I've tried it, believe me.
No, I know for sure. It's very tiring, and that's why people do it for 1 year, and then after that's kind of it. They're gonna try to find something else to do.
Yeah. And I mean, it's the same thing with furniture. Imagine running furniture and identifying the furniture in the box using X-ray. You know what components are supposed to be there. The machine takes that component base, it figures it out, it sees any cracks in the wood, it sees over drills on screws, it sees any missing, and it says good, no good. It sees if it's packed correctly. And
Oh,
that's
goodness,
it's the
crazy.
applications are never ending. The machine learning coupled with machine vision, and then this technology that exists today from an X-ray perspective, from a tunnel point of view, introducing robotics into it on top of all that, it's going to change the world of handling returns. It's going to change the world, period.
Wow, that's pretty insane. That is really insane when you think about it. And
Yeah.
now we were talking about the policies, and you were talking at one point also about like customer rating. And I heard that also that some people got banned from very famous brands to buy because they were doing that wardrobing too much of buying,
Yeah.
for $1,000 worth of stuff, trying everything on, and then returning, 95% of it.
It's called a trusted algorithm. So one of the pieces of SaaS, we have trusted algorithms for our enterprise customers. What we didn't have and wasn't very prevalent out there, especially in the SMB world, from these kind of front end facing returns portals, they didn't have a trusted customer algorithm. So we took what we had in our enterprise, and we worked with some of the biggest companies in the world for trusted customer algorithms. We saw how they worked and how they operated, and we built a much smaller version of it for the SMBs, and we allow them to configure their own trusted algorithms. And what they do is they're capable of configuring, if a lifetime value of the customer is over a certain amount, if they purchased over a certain amount over the last 6 months, if the item value is below a certain number, if the return rate is below, my margin, and my margin's 10%, and they're returning 8, I'm okay with it. If they're returning 3, I'm okay with it. But if they return 4 or 5 or 9, I'm not okay with it. And configuring all that and giving that power to the brand is an amazing thing, because it gives them the ability to control their customer base. It gives them something they've never had before. On top of that, most of them have already cracked down on returns and are saying, hey, if you're not a trusted customer, we're using their own kind of archaic algorithms, we don't want to take your return back. Now, a lot of times they'll end up kind of isolating or banning customers that are should have been trusted, but maybe had 1 or 2 cases of and they don't know how to do those algos. So we provided SaaS that does that. Most brands are charging now for returns. There's a lot of really cool tech out there that's happening.
Try
There's
to
ways to
level out
avoid that.
the playing field with the
Well, once one company does it, especially on the enterprise side, they're saying we're going to start charging, or we're going to diminish the return window. It's going to go from 30 days to 15 days, and we're going to start charging for certain returns. There's no such thing as free returns. You can drop off a return, like Amazon lets you drop off returns where they own the ecosystem, where they have backhauls of trucks in places like Whole Foods or whatever. They can put it on a truck that goes backwards. They let you drop it off for free. But places like UPS, they're starting to charge now, because that's not their own infrastructure. If you give it to one of their drivers, they'll take it. But if it's a UPS store, they won't. If it's Kohl's or Whole Foods, they will. So they're trying to use their own logistics to use what's called a backhaul, which is a returning load that dropped off forward logistics product in that retail environment. They're using the backhaul because it's going back empty anyway, so might as well carry returns. And that they're willing to do for free. But anything else, they're learning from this, and they're saying, why should I handle the fee? I'm going to charge you $1. I'm going to charge you $1.50. Companies like H&M started charging, $1 and change, $2, $3, whatever it is. Zara for taking returns. If you're not going to go to a physical store, they're saying a physical store is free, but I'm going to charge you a couple of bucks or whatever if you want. It's a deterrent. That's what it is. It really is a deterrent.
to have people, pay a little bit more attention to what they're buying.
Yeah, and also return it in an environment where they're driving foot traffic to the store, where there's an actual attempt at maybe upselling them in that store, where there's a possibility to, the average numbers over 100% sold. I think it's 160 cents on a dollar for every customer that walks in to do a return. They end up walking out with more than what they intend to return, if that's the right store you sent them to. So if you take an Amazon buyer that, maybe bought a piece of electronics and you send them to Whole Foods, they're not going to buy anything at Whole Foods. They're just coming there to return the item. But if you send that same Amazon buyer to a Best Buy, now there's foot traffic, to a Kohl's or whatever, there's foot traffic. There's a value in having them in that store. But
that's pretty cool. And so I always have one question that I like to ask to finish the podcast, but that could be a whole other podcast, which is, and for this particular episode, I want to kind of change it a little bit, but it's, what are you excited about technology and what are you worried about?
So I'm really excited about robotics. I'm really excited about AI, and I'm excited about kind of the world of quantum, of artificial intelligence, especially generative, that you can communicate with a machine. I'm really excited about the kind of the culminated warehouse robot companies like Figure AI that are out there, or Optimus, or like Tesla's Optimus, where Elon Musk's Optimus, where these machines are going to be able to take over roles that humans don't want to do and work alongside human beings. But I'm also scared. I think there's going to be that's the same thing that keeps me up at night. I think, it's 40 million people in the United States alone. It's a massive amount of human beings. And I think that the world is going to change. And I hope that it changes for the better. Historically, technology, and I'm an optimist, so I'm going to tell you that historically, technology that's disruptive changes the world for the better. Things like the printing press, the cell phone. But there's a lot of people that are afraid of it, because a lot of industries go belly up. And I think staying in front of it is extremely important. And I think that's, as a company, we need to do that. As an entrepreneur, I'm always afraid of failure. I think, the imposter syndrome is a standard thing for every entrepreneur on the planet. I'll always be afraid of failure. And I think, I don't have a very formal education. I come from a very humble background. So I always want to very much be on top of things, from a kind of educational perspective and a learning point of view. So I'm afraid to fail. But I believe very strongly in this company and its future.
And I think the mission you have is amazing. And with everything you said, I would feel more reassured to give you my returns if I had any, knowing that,
Well,
or
thank
to
you.
buy from you as like a re-commerce, which I like this term.
I love that.
And the thing, knowing that, like, you have some kind of X-ray or black light machines to make sure that everything is nice, clean, that you don't have some weird stuff happening. So it's a good peace of mind as well for people. And I'm extremely excited about your company. So I really, wish you all the luck and all the success that you can have. And I really appreciate this
Luck
episode.
is important in business, and thank you very much for the opportunity to interview. Thank you. Thank you.